Hello, everybody. It's me, Steve. It's a beautiful day. People are out. Dogs are barking at me because that happens all the time on this. It really does happen all the time on this series. Houses are getting painted, like this one. And he's got something going on over there. Anyway, the weather's beautiful. It's nice. It's charming. It's also May 17th. 2021, which means another day, another story. But before we get to that, remember, as always, you want to help my channel grow, remember to like, share, subscribe, hit on my Patreon if you want to help me out that way. I'm always posting new stuff there, thanking you for helping me. And the link to that is in the description below, as well as the links to my Instagram and Facebook pages closely related to the content I'm producing both on my This Day in History channel, as well as my primary channel, Steve the Amateur Historian. And these blogs are being, I said blogs again. These vlogs are being posted to both channels, so you can watch them on either one. And all that said, let's get to today's story. I tripped on literally the most flattest edge of Earth ever. So, courtroom drama has always been a feature that attracts attention. It is drama, after all. You know, anywhere from a major nationally recognized trial that's going on for months, some like real Manson family type stuff, down to just random oddball civil court, divorce court type situations. There's always some juicy drama to be seen, to be had, and it doesn't really get reported on much, at least in the written press anymore. But back in the day, newspapers loved reporting on weird, strange, random little things that would happen during court proceedings, literally from the biggest ones down to like little, you know, nothing court-related stuff that nobody outside of the people directly involved would even know was happening. And sometimes the newspapers would get their hands on these little random stories and they would run with them. You know, even if it was just a little block article to fill some space on a page, if there was something kooky going on in a court-like setting, it would get posted somewhere. So that takes us back to May 17th, 1919. The setting, a courtroom. We're in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And you've got a guy named Martin Quirk, which is interesting because this is kind of a quirky story. Martin Quirk and his wife, Sophia Quirk. You know, they got married at one point. I think maybe at least at some point they were madly in love. But like in a lot of romances, something happened along the line. They hit the skids. Someone fooled around with someone. Martin saw a girl walking by in a pretty dress and glanced at her too long, and I don't know what happened. Things happen. There's romance is falling apart all over the world right now as we speak. But, you know, whatever the case was that had caused strain in the Quirk marriage, come May 1919, they were in a courtroom together. And it appears the reason they were all in court that day was a tussle of sorts had occurred, sparking a fight, an argument, in all likelihood, that at its peak saw Martin Quirk smack his wife really hard across the face. Her retort to that was to have him arrested, which, good for her. You know, way back then, it was kind of generally accepted that, you know, unfortunately men were allowed to do a lot of things to, you know, keep their wives or women in line. So I mean, that is the good part of this story, and I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer when I get to the end of this story, but it really, you see this story and you're like, oh, isn't that sweet? But then when you look under the surface, you realize this was actually not a good resolution, and it kind of downplayed the reality of the situation, which was probably that, you know, I can't speak for this family. I don't know anything about them outside of this article, but I get the feeling if this guy smacked his wife once, he'd probably done it other times, and maybe had been abusive in other ways. Now maybe this was a one-time thing, but the fact that his wife had him arrested makes me think that this probably wasn't the first time this had happened. This had probably happened before in the past. Oh man, I'm being pursued. Oh man, he just, no. No, that guy literally, the guy riding that thing looked back at me because he obviously could tell I was probably reacting to him. And I just saw him turn ahead and chuckle and just go like, thinks I'm one of those weird people, which I am. I mean, it's not really that much of a stretch, but sorry, that was just a little break in the story. That was entertaining. Usually my quirks don't get noticed when I'm making them towards someone, but I obviously gave that guy a good chuckle. At least he didn't give me the finger or something. So anyway, so we are in a courtroom because a man has physically assaulted his wife, and she is taking him to court over it. So she's like, you know, she didn't just call the police. She didn't just have him arrested. Now she is in court with him. Like, she's ready to, you know, go the distance with this, which again makes me think that this probably wasn't the first time that something along these lines has happened. And in the midst, again, this is kind of the quirky, funny part of the story, but it's also unfortunately kind of tragic and, I mean, at the same time representative of the time and place. So the magistrate, love that word, presiding over the thing, is looking at him, probably hearing the different arguments from each side. And suddenly he looks at Martin Quirk and he says, if you go over there and kiss your wife, give your wife a kiss, then, you know, I will, I guess, essentially drop this case. And as it's described in the article, Martin Quirk's face goes like 4,000 shades of red. He's probably embarrassed, and he's got well, you know, a lot of men today aren't great at showing their affections, and it was probably considerably more so back in 1919. So I'm thinking, you know, now this guy has to kiss his wife in front of a courtroom full of people, so he probably wasn't super excited. But he also, like, this was the one thing standing between him and getting away with it, essentially. So he tenses up, walks over, and manages to give his wife what was described as a loving kiss, at which time she just glowed and turned to the magistrate and said that she would like to drop all charges at that moment. So again, you see that and you go, oh, they really did love each other. But at the same time, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, okay, again, this is probably not the first time this guy has done this. And second of all, under what circumstances does an honest to goodness judge who's presiding over a case of a man who has smacked his wife right across the face, something she didn't deserve unless she was trying to murder him or something, which I don't think were the circumstances, because you'd think he'd file counter charges. Oh, I smacked her in the face. Yeah, well, she tried to murder me, so who's worse? And the fact that the judge was willing to literally let this guy go and just kind of supersede I guess, any of the rights of Sophia Quirk in this case and just let the guy go, because he would show this little moment of affection to his wife. Oh, go give your wife a good kiss, and if it's a nice enough kiss, well, then it's obvious that you two really love each other. And maybe things were okay after that. Probably not, considering a lot of men, you know, lorded over their wives back in this day, even the so-called decent ones. Like, that was just what they did for the most part. They were the authority figures. So that's what bothered me about kind of that dynamic of this case. On the surface it seems sweet, but really it was kind of a representation of the time. So what do you think? It's really hard to say without knowing all the details. Just understanding that time period the way I do, and knowing the way that husbands treated their wives, and the fact that a lot of them mistreated them over and over again and practically never got in any trouble because, you know, there wasn't really any help for women back then. If you were in an abusive marriage, like, you know, there was one of those things you didn't talk about, or nobody wanted to help you, or nobody believed you, or people thought your husband had the right to do that kind of stuff. And so I have a feeling that this guy was probably another in a long line of abusive husbands, which makes this story not as sweet as it sounds, not even really qualifying as bittersweet. If you think that this judge, this is guy who's supposed to preside over law and order, and yet he says, well, you know, give your wife a kiss and we'll just act like none of this ever happened. That's messed up. That doesn't seem right to me. Now, in the, you know, long odds that, okay, fine, maybe this was a situation where this was like a one-time thing and the husband felt bad about it. I don't know. They implied that he was kind of embarrassed to have to kiss his wife in front of people, which, you know, men are prideful creatures, and they were even more so back in the day. So there's just a lot of things that aren't known, and a lot of things that need to be kind of mulled over. But I get the vibes that this guy was probably an abusive husband like most back then, and therefore this story doesn't really have a great ending. But even with that understood, it is kind of just an interesting little thing where people are in court. It's never fun. It's usually tense, and it was kind of broken in that moment when this thing happened. And hey, in the end, the wife said, oh, well, you know what? I'll drop my charges. So I don't know. Maybe, you know, there's maybe something there we don't know. I don't know. But what do you think? Well, whatever the case, I hope you at least enjoyed today's video for how semi-odd it turned out to be. And if you like what I'm doing here, you like today's video, you like the general concept I'm following with this ongoing daily series, please remember to like, share, subscribe, hit up my Patreon. I'm always posting new stuff there, and the link to that is in the description below if you want to help me out that way, as well as the links to my Instagram and Facebook pages closely related to the content I'm producing both for This Day in History and my main channel, Steve the Amateur Historian. All that said, this has been Steve, and I'll see you tomorrow.